Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and this is the summary for the day of 553 to 554 for the 30th to 31st of August. And the channel, this DPA war channel, is just 800 subs away from 40,000 subs. So do press the subscribe button if you are not subscribed to support me to get these 800 subs. So anyway, let's start off with the Southern Front. Over at the Southern Front, we have Ukrainian Navy or naval activities again. Again, we are talking about very speedy military boats. They were detected again by the Russian Black Sea Fleet, and then Air Force was being sent. Apparently, the aircraft are Sukhoi 30 SMs, fighter jets, and then they sent over. They used cannons, damaged some of the boats, as usual. After that, the Ukrainians actually escaped towards the Snake Island, and in the gathering around the Snake Island, there's a cluster of boats over there. They got hit by cluster bombs by the Russian side. So these are reports coming from Raiva, and so you can take this with a pinch of salt if you want to. But I just want to note that the Russians, from my reporting, I have not really noticed Russians using much cluster weapons until the Ukrainians started using them. So it's kind of like, also helping the Russians alleviate some of these ammunition problems, to be honest. And we move into the Kherson Front. At the Kherson Front, we have a Ukrainian amphibious operation just off Pistepne. So this is Pistepne. The Ukrainian forces have this amphibious landing near Pistepne, and after later reports suggest that it was actually in the northwestern part. The Ukrainian forces landed over here and created a beachhead. So fighting was immediately happened with Russian forces engaging them, and this was on the 30th. By the 31st, the Ukrainians still holds the beachhead over at this northeastern part of Pistepne. So the Ukrainians again managed to land forces and create trouble for the Russian forces. This is actually very near to the railway bridge over here, where the Ukrainian forces previously have this salient or this bridgehead over here. We have no more news about these guys over here. We do not know whether they are still around. No news about them for a long time. And over at this just off Kherson city at the Antonovsky Bridge, the Ukrainians still hold the bridgehead over at Dachi. We have information coming from pro-Russian source reporting that the Ukrainian forces landed another 7 troops to reinforce, or probably to rotate, we're not sure, but this is a transferred forces over to this area here to continue to hold this forward position. The Russians are probably caught in the no man's land, like in between. They're not sure if they should clear out these Ukrainian forces or not, because every time they try to move forward, they get hit by Ukrainian mines, artillery, drones, or whatnot. So it makes it like a very hard decision for the Russian forces to decide what to do with all these Ukrainian forces that is landing over on the southern part, or rather, on the islands between this river. We move on to the Zaporizhzhia Front. Over at the Zaporizhzhia Front, we have Ukrainian forces continue their offensive over at the Orikhiv sector. Is also known as the direction towards Melitopol. The concentration of the actions is mostly in the direction of VERBOVE, and the Ukrainian forces are still fighting within Robotine. Reports from Russian Defense Ministry on the 30th of August suggest that there is still fighting over at Robotine or near to Robotine. However, what's interesting is that there is this geolocation by Dnipro OSIN, which is a pro-Ukrainian source, showing that the Ukrainian Bradley vehicles, I believe I saw 2 in the footage, they are traveling down this road, and then they got hit by a anti-tank guided missile. So this actually shows that the Russian forces still have fire control of some sort around the southern part of Robotine. Because if you look at this situation, this place, this is basically almost the center of Robotine, and it looks like the Russian forces indeed still have control over the southern outskirts, and the fighting is probably still within the southern part of Robotine. And this actually corroborates this geolocation by this pro-Ukrainian source, actually corroborates the pro-Russian narrative that the Russian forces are still holding on the southern outskirts of Robotine, that the Ukrainians still have not managed to secure the town nor push southward. So this actually is pretty interesting. There is this entrenchment over here. I remember I saw this satellite imaging of this entrenchment southwest of Robotine. So I think this is also not captured yet by the Ukrainian forces. So yeah, so that the situation here is pretty much getting closer more to being clarified. The Ukrainian forces mainly is focusing their effort over at VERBOVE. We have fighting reported towards VERBOVE from the 30th to 31st. Russian Defense Ministry and Ryba reported about this attack against VERBOVE, including Ukrainian artillery using cluster munitions. And on the 31st, yesterday, we still have reports from the Russian Defense Ministry continuing their reports on this. Maroshinikov, the pro-Ukrainian source, also talked about some success in the area of VERBOVE, and they are also trying to go around VERBOVE, which no mapping has shown this is to be the case. And Ryba also reported in detail about 2 assault groups from the 15th Brigade of the National Guards conducting a reconnaissance in force northwest of VERBOVE. This is actually referring to probably around this area here, I suspect. Maybe it's around this area here. And let me see. Yeah, and then the Ukrainian forces also use Sukhoi 25 attack aircraft to support their offensive actions. So this fighting towards VERBOVE is still ongoing. So this one is... So the Ryba also reported about fighting from the area of Balka-Chubenkov. Balka-Chubenkov was actually listed to be something around this area here. Maybe that's Uspenivka as well. So they say that the Ukrainian forces are launching attack from this direction. I believe is from the northern side of this trench line. The Ukrainians are actually heading in this direction. We also have reports of fighting west of VERBOVE. This is reported by Ryba. They mentioned about an offensive towards Balka-Krivoy. Balka-Krivoy is actually in this direction here. This something like a valley or river water system kind of thing over here. So they're fighting in that direction, and that's exactly where the Russian main line is actually located. So, and Deep State UA on the 31st still continue to be reporting the fighting west of VERBOVE, which is probably the same place. So the Ukrainian forces are still attacking it in towards this trench line, which the Russians are currently have this major line around here. And we have no more reports about this breakthrough. Looks like this breakthrough has been quenched, or maybe that the Ukrainians actually have captured a huge part of these trenches. Tentatively, things are still unclear. The fog of war is pretty thick at this moment, as the Ukrainians are launching massive attacks against VERBOVE, as they think that they probably saw some kind of breakthrough, or maybe saw some kind of opportunity that they are pouncing upon. There is reinforcement reported west of VERBOVE, according to Ryba, moving from Mala Tomashka all the way to this area here, as the Ukrainian forces are gathering up a major force over this region to maybe do a breakthrough, or maybe head towards Novoprokopivka. So depending on where the Ukrainians want to attack towards, this major force may prove to be pretty useful for the Ukrainian side. We also have the Ukrainian Defense Ministry reported that the Russians were actually attacking at VERBOVE on the 30th of August. So this might actually suggest that the Russians might have some kind of counter-offensive that was actually pushing this Ukrainian force out of this salient, this small little salient just off the outskirts of VERBOVE. This might actually be a response to that, but we're not sure, because Ukrainian Defense Ministry's claims of Russian offensive can be pretty wonky. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry also reported fighting in the area of Mala Tomashka. We do not... So Mala Tomashka is actually here. So we are not sure where this attack is referring to. So just take it with a pinch of salt, as usual. Ukrainian forces also reported reinforcement at Mala Tomashka. I believe this is the one that was sent south towards the west of VERBOVE, because both information come from Ryba, and this one actually precedes the other one. So Ryba reported the reinforcement at Mala Tomashka on the 30th, and on the 31st they mentioned about the Mala Tomashka moving to the west of VERBOVE. 180 mechanized, 180 mechanized. So yeah, correct. So this is the same unit. So Ukrainian forces sent reinforcement quickly to Mala Tomashka, and then they were sent south all the way to the western part of VERBOVE. So looks like the battle must be very intense for the Ukrainian forces to quickly send forces from the reserve all the way to the front line. So fighting is still ongoing over at the Orikhiv sector, and we move into the Velyka Novosilka sector. This is Velyka Novosilka. At the Velyka Novosilka sector, I want to first highlight that the Ukrainians reporting, they tend to report towards the ending part that they are still conducting offensive operations in the direction of Melitopol and Berdyansk. However, the mentioning of Berdyansk, which is actually referring to the fighting over here in the Velyka Novosilka sector, is no longer being mentioned since the past 10 days. So which might actually suggest that the entire offensive, the main offensive over at this Uruzhaine region, Staromayoske region, Prione region, the main offensive has been abandoned or cancelled. They are no longer making a main push here. Fighting is definitely still going to be continuing in this area because the Ukrainian forces needed to continue to secure whatever they have conquered, and I would say this has been pretty successful for the Ukrainians. So as the Ukrainians managed to capture Starozheve, Makarivka, Staromayoske, Uruzhaine, Rifnopil, Novodarivka, Vatne, and maybe Orkhivske as well. And they are close to Prione, they are close to Zavine, Bazania. So this offensive is actually pretty successful in that sense, if you look at the amount of grounds that they have captured. And reinforcement is continuing to be reported in this area here. We have artillery arriving at Berezove as well as Shevchenko. We have also the 23rd Mechanized Brigade arriving at Rifnopil. So there are definitely more forces moving into this area here, and probably going to fan out or to secure better defensive positions against the Russian forces currently in this area here. We have fighting being reported at Prione. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, the Vostok group of forces mentioned about repelling an attack an infantry attack towards Prione. Then the Russians also were reportedly doing a fire attack against Ukrainian forces near Novodarivka, which might suggest that the Ukrainian forces actually have some gathering of forces over in this area here that may allow them to continue to conduct offensive actions. I did notice that Deep State UA did not acknowledge this much capture, or all these captures around this area here, because they have, I'm not sure why, but for me, I think that this is probably right, despite the geolocation was from Deep State UA themselves. We have the Russians going on the offensive around the Staromayoske region, with fighting reported west of Staromayoske on the 30th of August. According to Ryba, they say that the Russian forces went into a skirmish with the Rifle Battalion of the 1st Tank Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces west of Staromayoske, and they managed to push back the Ukrainians a bit. So the Russian forces are attacking on the western part, and this is actually also acknowledged by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, talking about repelling Russian attacks in the area of Staromayoske. So it might not be an attack towards the town, but maybe the attack is mainly over in the western part of Staromayoske. Over on the other side, we still have fighting being reported at Uruzhaine on the 31st of August. This is actually since 26th of August. There wasn't any much fighting since then. Like 22 to 24th, then after that there was a pause for 1 day, then 26th, then there's another pause for another 4 or 5 days. Then on the 31st, we have fighting reported. And the Vostok group of forces reported it was a recon attempt near Uruzhaine. So this also does corroborates that the termination of the Berdyansk offensive by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry in their reports. They did that quietly, because I didn't even notice that until I was like taking notice. I was like checking, I was just checking And then I was like, they didn't mention the Berdyansk offensive. So I was like tracking back all the reports, and then I realized that they have not mentioned Berdyansk for the past 10 days. So that's all for the Zaporizhzhia front. Wrong color. Yeah, so clearer. This is the Zaporizhzhia front. And we move on into the Donetsk front. So this is the Donetsk front. At the Donetsk front, we have fighting mainly reported at Marinka. As usual, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry reported the Russians are attacking over in the Marinka region. And this time round, on the 31st, we have acknowledgement from Deep State UA mentioning about the Russians attacking at Marinka. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry also on the 31st mentioned about fighting over at Novosilka. So this is Novosilka. So there's some kind of a Russian offensive in this area here. We're not sure exactly where. And interesting information over at Kurakove, at the railway station at Kurakove, we have Challenger tanks being spotted along with some air defense systems of unknown type around this area here. So it's currently unknown where will these tanks be sent to, because apparently, according to the pro-Russian source, they only mentioned that they were transferred to this railway station, but they are still going to be headed to somewhere else. They are not sure it's going to be headed towards Marinka or towards Avdiivka. So they are still trying to find out. The pro-Russian source are still trying to find out. We move into the Avdiivka front. This is the Avdiivka front. At the Avdiivka front, we only have reports of fighting over at Avdiivka. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, on the 31st of August, they mentioned about Ukrainian attacking near Avdiivka. However, the Deep State UA mentioned that this is actually a Russian attack. So we're not sure who is attacking, given the conflicting information. The Russian Defense Ministry on the 30th of August also reported about Ukrainian attack at Krasnohorivka. So this is Krasnohorivka, and the Ukrainians are still attacking over in this area here. So that's all from the Avdiivka front. We move into the Bakhmut front. This is Bakhmut city. In the southern part of Bakhmut front, we have fighting reported at Mayos. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, they say Mayos was attacked on the 31st of August. The day before, they mentioned about Ukrainians attacking towards Zaporizhzhia direction. So the fighting we see close to Zaporizhzhia. And there's not much to talk about because we don't really have much details. The Ukrainians continue their Bakhmut offensive in the southern part with fighting reported at Klishchiivka, Andriivka, Kodyomivka, and Ozeryanivka. All these reports is being mentioned by Miroshnikov, the pro-Ukrainian source, talking about the fighting all the way from Klishchiivka to Ozeryanivka. So this is reported on the 31st of August. So we can kind of see that the Ukrainians are still not giving up just yet. We have the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, however, on the 30th of August mentioned about the Russians conducting offensive operations over at Kodyomivka. And further up north, the Andriivka was also acknowledged by the Russian Defense Ministry on the 31st of August about the Ukrainian attack. Miroshnikov Deep State UA also acknowledged the fighting over at Andriivka. At Klishchiivka itself, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry said that the Russians were conducting offensive operation on the 30th. But the Miroshnikov continued to talk about Klishchiivka is being attacked by the Ukrainian forces, and Deep State UA also acknowledged the fighting over at Klishchiivka. So that's happening. And there's a weird thing that happened over at the Bakhmut front for the Ukrainian side, is that there is another collision by Ukrainian aircraft. This time round is two Mi-8 transport helicopters. These Mi-8 helicopters apparently have crashed near the front line near Bakhmut while conducting a combat mission, and allegedly six crews and pilots were killed in this situation. And this incident actually created a criminal investigation by the SBU. They're trying to find out what is the cause of the crash, which I find is very interesting because they are near the front line and they collided for whatever reason. And for whatever reason, because if you're at the front line, you get shot down, that's very normal. But to have SBU investigation, a criminal investigation. I find this very peculiar. This is actually tweeted out by Sense Defender, which I believe is a pro-Ukrainian OSINT. So I find this particularly interesting. This is basically the second crash. Previously there was two trainer aircraft that crashed. So now we yet have another crash. Probably this is why the SBU is investigating to see if there's any wrongdoing or any espionage or hacking or whatever that's currently happening that caused all these unusual accidents. We move on to the northern part of the Bakhmut Front. We have fighting reported at Bodanivka. This time around, the fighting at Bodanivka is very interesting because it is the Russian Defense Ministry reporting that the Ukrainians are attacking near Bodanivka. Usually what we do get is that the Russians are being mentioned by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry to be attacking. The last one was on the 29th of August. This time around on the 31st of August, the Russians say that the Ukrainians are doing the attack. So I find this particularly interesting. Let's see whether this will sustain. Deep State UA reported fighting near Orikhiv, Vasilivka. However, the Deep State did not mention about who is attacking. So what I do is that I actually use the last reported information, which is the Russians attacking, and I indicated as the Russians are attacking. Otherwise, that's all from the Bakhmut Front. We move on to the Siversk Front. At the Siversk Front, the Russian Defense Ministry on the 30th of August mentioned about Ukrainian attack towards Bilohorivka in this direction, and that's about it. We do not have any other information there. Over at the Bilohorivka on the Luhansk region, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry mentioned on the 30th of August that the Russians are conducting an offensive at Bilohorivka, but it was not mentioned on the 31st, so it might probably be just some kind of skirmish. And that's all from Siversk. We move into Kreminna Front. This is Kreminna. The Ukrainian forces continue their Kreminna offensive at Yampolivka, Dibrova, and Serebrenske Forestry. Fighting is being reported within the Serebrenske Forestry by the Russian Defense Ministry, and as well as by the Center Group of Forces, mentioning about Ukrainian attack. And the Russians also mentioned about them conducting fire missions on Ukrainian forces, particularly the Azov Special Purpose Brigade that was currently being mentioned to be fighting in the region. However, there is this. So while all these are very vague, Deep State UA, the pro-Ukrainian OSINT, they mapped that the Russians actually have some advance. Previous mapping, the front line was something like this. The Russians apparently have managed to capture yet another piece of this forest region. So this is an acknowledgement by the pro-Ukrainian side that the Russians are still making pushes. So despite all these claims of Ukrainians attacking, it looks like the Russians are still quietly doing offensive operations within this area here. Dibrova also ceased fighting on the 31st of August, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. At Torske, we have the fire mission being reported. Same story with the one that was mentioned about within the Serebrenske Forestry. And also we have the Ukrainians attacking at Yampolivka, according to the Center Group of Forces. So that's all for the Kreminna Front. We move further up north to the Svatove Front. This is Svatove. The Svatove Front, we have continued fighting over in the Novosilka region. So there is fighting being reported near Serhievka from the 30th to the 31st, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. They mentioned about the Ukrainians attacking in the Serhievka direction. Over in the Novosilka direction, the Russian Defense Ministry also mentioned that the Ukrainians are attacking in this area here. However, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry actually says that it is the Russians that is attacking at Novosilka, and this information on the next day, which is yesterday, 31st of August, is mentioned by Myroshnikov and Deep State. So this Deep State actually have some more details. They say that the Russians use a battalion of tanks against the Ukrainian forces. So kind of vague at this moment. We're not sure who is the one attacking, with conflicting information. So fighting is still ongoing over in this area here. Moving on, there is no information about fighting over at Novosilka, which is refreshing, to be honest. So the last report was on the 28th. So looks like the Ukrainians have given up on Novosilka. We move into the Kupyansk Front. This is the Kupyansk Front. At the Kupyansk Front, the Russian forces continue their Kupyansk offensive, with fighting being reported at Khyslivka, according to Myroshnikov, on the 31st of August in this area here. And the main push over this region here continues, with the Russian forces being reported to be fighting in the area of Petropavlivka. Both information coming from Myroshnikov. The Russians did mention they are conducting some kind of operation, but no details, so we can't map it. The Russians only mentioned about Ukrainians doing counter-offensive operations or attacks over in the area of Sinkovka. And Myroshnikov also mentioned about battles at Sinkivka, which is likely to be the Ukrainian counter-offensive. So looks something like this at this moment. It looks very half-hearted already. I don't think the Russians are really serious about pushing towards Kupyansk at this moment. It looks like they are just enticing the Ukrainians to do counterattacks. So that's all from the Kupyansk Front. Over at the border region between Russia and Ukraine, there is a Ukrainian incursion into the Russian territory in Berdyansk. The region is called the Nevlinsky region, which is around this forest region here. And probably this is how they infiltrated through the forest. However, they got spotted, and the Russian units contacted this. Contact means they fight. They fight against these Ukrainian troops, and 2 of them were killed. 2 of the Ukrainian soldiers were killed. 5 was captured. This information coming from the pro-Russian source. So if you're pro-Ukrainian, take it with a pinch of salt. And that's it for the summary for the day of 553 for the 554 for the 30th to 31st of August. So some conclusion. Haven't done conclusion for some time because of all these changes in terms of formattings. So no people ask me for conclusion. So no conclusions. The significant information is this. I have done a video on this about the Ukrainians dropping their offensive towards Berdyansk, and I actually did notice this reduction in terms of the fighting, the intensity of fighting over in the Uruzhane, Staromayorsky region. I haven't seen the Ukrainians doing a concerted offensive operation in this area here for some time, and this is also why I was triggered to actually look closer at that part of the report by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, and this is also why I managed to spot that they have quietly dropped the word Berdyansk from their report. So whatever we are seeing over here at the Velyka Novosilka sector is the Ukrainian forces trying to secure Staromayorsky, Uruzhane, as well as maybe capture Prione. Because they need Prione in order to secure this region in a better way, to push the Russians back to the next line, so that they can actually have a firm control over this region here. And what the Ukrainians would need is actually capturing the entire western part of Staromayorsky, the entire northern part, and the northeastern part of Prione. And then they need also the entire eastern part of Uruzhane. This will at least give them some kind of a straight front line that they can actually hold better, and some very more defendable positions. And of course, the Ukrainians, people will always claim that yeah, of course, Ukrainians will want Zavidne Bazania, but easier said than done. And also that any claims about the Ukrainians going for Starolimnivka is probably not true. We totally have no evidence of Ukrainian forces getting anywhere close to Starolimnivka, despite of all these reports from Myroshnikov, this pro-Ukrainian source talking about heading towards Starolimnivka. So this is also why Myroshnikov, while he seems to feature quite a bit, that's because he reports a lot more and a lot of very unique information. But it does also show that he's still pretty much a fanboy, and that his information only allows him to be a secondary source, which is what he is. He is not part of my primary source. Primary source is like Deep State UA, Ryba. These are primary sources. So the Ukrainian forces are continuing to send reinforcement to this area here. So this is probably to aid them in securing that line that I was mentioning about. The other major Ukrainian offensive towards Melitopol, this one, which is the Orikhiv sector. The Orikhiv sector, the Ukrainian forces are stuck. If you ask me, it looks a lot like they have stuck. The Ukrainian forces' ideal plan was actually to capture Robotine, create a zone, put pressure on Novoprokopivka, continue to spread out and close up against this major defense line that the Russians have built up, and probably even flank backwards, capture the high ground, the trench lines over here. However, as far as I can tell, there is no evidence, despite Surya maps did map that the Ukrainians have captured this. I have no clear indication that the Ukrainians actually captured these trench lines or on the western part of Robotine. In fact, there's a high chance that the Russians are still holding these trench lines around Robotine, and the Ukrainians are simply just bypassing and they are trying to attack in this way. And this looks like to be the case, because we must also take note that these are two lines of defenses. There's another two lines here. This is designed to actually discourage the Ukrainians to try to attack between Kopani and Robotine. Is a deliberate thing. They design it in a way to funnel Ukrainian forces into this area here. They don't want them to go through in this direction. So, which is why, and you can actually kind of see why, because this entire area is just one massive piece of farmland, and this kind of places can get very troublesome. But I'm not sure. This is just how the Russians have designed the defense lines. And indeed, the Ukrainians are pushing in these directions, and they are now finding it very hard to push further down, as this is major lines and you can actually get hit from two sides. So maybe this is also why we are seeing that the Ukrainians are focusing their effort in this direction. They are heading towards VERBOVE, and I find that the breakthrough previously was very interesting, that they just drive through the center road around the two major lines, and I find this very hilarious. But we have this counterattack reported by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, which might suggest that the Russians have actually managed to recapture this ground. So this is the focus now. But I have my doubts whether the Ukrainians can continue to keep up this offensive. I have heard rumors that they are running out. Rumors from my own sources. So we shall see how this goes. The Ukrainian forces still have not deployed their Challenger tanks into frontline actions. There are still a lot of Leopard 2 tanks that was also not seen in action, despite they claim that they were. So the Ukrainians still have some forces left, but the key thing is this: even if the Ukrainians still have another 50 Leopard 2s, you cannot use them all, because you also need them to use for defensive purposes. For example, all these grounds that the Ukrainians have captured need to be held. How to hold this line is not just trenches, you also need tanks. So this is also why you cannot just exhaust all your tanks, all your armored vehicles in their offensive. You can capture the ground, but you cannot hold it, then there's no point. So which is also why maybe that's why we are not seeing more actions from this Ukrainian tanks, and the situation currently is still pretty dynamic around this VERBOVE region. A lot of claims, a lot of random claims, a lot of Ukrainian claims about Ukrainians having this kind of capture, which I don't think is accurate. It doesn't sounds very sensible, doesn't sound very logical. So anyway, the situation at Orikhiv continue to be very exciting. Otherwise, Russian Kupyansk offensive is a joke as far as I am concerned. It's no longer really an offensive, so it's a bit difficult to call it an offensive anymore at this rate, because the Russians are pretty much just playing around as far as I can tell. So they are just luring the Ukrainians into counter offensive, because the Russians did indeed make a push. They did manage to capture grounds. However, they are just holding the line and they are just tempting the Ukrainians to attack them. So, and the Ukrainians did indeed constantly attacking them. Just like in Sinkivka, 19th to 31st of August, every day there was a Ukrainian attack against the Russian forces over in the Sinkivka region. So this is not looking really good, and the Russians are also not pushing, because if they push, we will know, we will see it. So tentatively things look pretty dead. And the situation over at the Kreminna Front is also very comical. We have constant reports about Ukrainians attacking. Like, the Ukrainians are constantly doing this Kreminna offensive, especially in the forest region, fighting at Dibrova, Kuzmine, Siversk Forestry at Torske, and then in the end, all we get in terms of frontline changes was Deep State UA, the pro-Ukrainian source, showing that the Russians actually are capturing this ground. Like, the previous line was like this. The Russians actually captured more ground. So yeah, it's very weird. Yeah, it's just weird. The other main front line is actually in the southern part of Bakhmut Front, and the Ukrainian forces are trying their best to secure this area here. This is the objective, so that they can put fire control on this road and deny the Russians from using the road to supply to Bakhmut from the Donetsk or Orikhiv region. So in case you do not know, this Orikhiv, this Donetsk, so they can use this highway to resupply Bakhmut. So, which is also why fighting around Mayos is pretty important, because this Mayos is where the junction is, where the Russians are using this road to go up. According to our mapping, that Ukrainians do have fire control on this road, but we do not have updates on this area for a very, very long time, and Surya maps actually map the Russians actually to be something like this. So we will have to take the mapping here with a pinch of salt, because this is a very underappreciated position. So we don't have a lot of information about this area here. So this road is pretty important for the Russians, and the Ukrainians do want to capture Klishevka, Andriivka, Kuryamivka, Ozerenivka. These 4 settlements are prime objective, and once they can capture this, they will be able to form a tank, like this, that is lying down. So they will actually be able to use this as a very strong foothold to launch new offensive towards Zaporizhzhia, Kodema, Vyshina, and Opine. This will then create massive problems for the Russian side. However, they cannot even capture Andriivka, the small little town of Andriivka. They cannot even capture that at this moment. So things is pretty desperate for the Ukrainians, because they really need this to justify all the sacrifices thus far, because capturing all this farmland and the canal region is not enough. Like, really, it's not enough. So anyway, that's all I would say for the conclusions. And also another thing is this helicopter clash is very suspicious. This was mentioned by the Joker DPR, the hacker group, the Russian hacker group. They say this is more than meets the eye. They don't want to say much. They only say that if you believe this is an innocent accident, they say that we are naive. So yeah, no, maybe that's why the SBU is being activated to investigate how did the helicopter crash. So anyway, this is the conclusion and this is the summary. Thank you for watching. Do press the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next update.